Center for Toddler Development with us today to speak to us about how we can balance working and parenting during a pandemic. So without further ado, I'm going to turn it over to Tovah and let her take it away.
Great, thank you. Thank you for having me. Hi, everybody. If you want to put your cameras on because we're small, please do. And if not, that's fine too. I'm going to have a slide presentation. But given that we're small, I always leave time for questions anyhow, but feel free to unmute yourself and ask a question or put your hand up, although I may not see it, but Rachel, you might, and you can cue me in. So I'm going to jump right in. Since we have just a few to start at least, can you tell me in the chat the ages of your children? That would be really helpful for the people who are here. Oh, a 2-year-old, a 6-year-old. Anyone else? So toddler, 4, 2. Okay, great. Oh, and a new mom. Congratulations.
Yeah.
Just entering. Oh, and one on the way too. Gotcha. You'll have your hands full with a 4-year-old and a newborn. You have a lot of humor. It's 36. You got to hopefully report back. All right. So I got some sense, at least right now, that we have, it sounds like on the younger side. So I'm going to share my slides with you. If I can find them. Oops. I lost my talk. Hold on. There it is. It's not good. Let me get them up for you. Okay. Here we go. So you can see that thumbs up? Yeah. Okay. So what I'm going to do is give a frame. Obviously the topic of working and being a parent in a pandemic is a big one. And the first time I did this pandemic talk was like almost exactly a year ago, the end of March. And it's just been interesting for me to think about at each step when I'm invited to give a talk, where we are in the pandemic, because there's some pieces about children that never change. It doesn't matter if we're in a pandemic, if we're not in a pandemic, or where we are in it. And then there's other pieces of your lives which do shift by what COVID is allowing us to do or not to do. So I'm going to talk kind of broadly about the context of the pandemic as it impacts parents and the needs of children, and then the needs of parents and children. And hopefully that will cover something for all of you, but please, as I said, ask questions. Okay. So I keep thinking about the pandemic as a new reality. If you think back to a year ago, or let's say by June, many people were saying, well, I hope this is not the new reality. And I was kind of saying, well, there will be shifts that we'll keep and there's shifts that we won't. But the important thing is wherever you are today is your reality for today. So the question always is, as a parent, I think, and a worker, what is happening now and what does this mean for me now? Some part of this year, hopefully your life has been steadier than others, and hopefully you're getting more steady. But as we know, it goes up and down as COVID and the pandemic and work demands change. So certainly the overarching context is uncertainty and unknowns. And what does that do to us? It gives us this feeling of a lack of control. And that's what we call anxiety. When there's a lack of control, anxiety goes up, whether it's what I call capital letter A, like you're a person who has anxiety, or you maybe never did before, but now you do in the pandemic, or lowercase a, which is that nervousness, kind of arousal, and children get that too. So new concerns, and again, those have shifted as the year has gone on. Maybe you had financial concerns, particularly when you were out of work or if you were furloughed. I'm not sure how your union did it, but last spring was harder. If you're employed, hopefully financial concerns are less. You might have elder parents to care for, and then there's all the child care and school issues, which have gone hand in hand with juggling being a parent and working. And I mean, I try to be very optimistic. Maybe one of the best things that could come out of this pandemic is a national understanding that people can't work if they don't have childcare. It would seem to be like news um, to many programs, policymakers, and so hopefully that will steady. But also your work demands are changing because of COVID. They might be changing for other reasons too, but certainly the COVID protocols, which seem to be steadier now, I would think, in your business, but they keep shifting. We hope with the vaccine they'll get steadier, we'll be able to open up more, but I think everybody's probably where I am, which is like, I see the hope, but we also know we're not in free yet. And then you have multiple roles, whether you're a mother, a father, a grandparent, you are a worker, you might be a partner, a spouse, you're a parent, you may be homeschooling if your child's online and they're in school, you might be juggling childcare with other families, you're trying to be a friend. It's an impossible task, really. And then you have whatever new stressors or worries that your personal situation has. And it sounds like most of the people on this call have younger children, but if you have older children, the schooling demands have really been a challenge. And if you have more than one child, the different levels of understanding the different needs of different children can make that really challenging. So, families might have a middle schooler and a first grader. Those are very different abilities and capabilities, and online has been a real challenge for people. And then I want to stress this, even if your children are really young right now, parents are not teachers, nor are we supposed to be. I have 3 children of my own, mainly grown at this point, but we're not supposed to be their teachers. They learn from us. Certainly we're raising them, but we're not school teachers, and that's made this very challenging. And then there's the social context that you're both working in and raising children in. There's racial unrest. There's all kinds of awareness of sexual harassment. There's politics. There was an election that we had to lead up to. So the main piece to take from this is what's your context and what is it right now, because it shifts. But children are different from adults. Here's the good news. Children focus first and foremost, particularly our youngest children, on themselves. And their main question is this: am I okay? So all this stuff that's swirling around in your life and your long shifts of work and then being home, what your child wants to know all the time is, am I okay? And when am I going to see you again? So what are the challenges? Well, they vary obviously by family and by the time that we're in. So there's your daily challenges, right? There's the getting out the door in the morning. If you have to take a child to childcare or get them to school, if you have that luxury and they're not online. There's getting through breakfast and getting dressed and getting yourself to work. That can be a real challenge for parents, even more so in the pandemic. I run a school, a program for 2-year-olds, and it's been outside this whole year. I'm at Barnard College, and they gave us a beautiful tent and a separate space on campus. It had gotten warmer, if you remember, a few weeks ago, and then Monday was really cold, and we let the parents know that we're going to still hold it, but to put snow pants back on everybody. And every parent practically who came in with their 2 or 3-year-old said, you don't even want to know the battle this morning to get snow pants on my child. Why? Because children like routine. And for the 2 weeks before, there were no snow pants. So that could be your challenge. There's the bigger overall challenges of dealing with work and being a parent. And again, they vary. And then there's this challenge that really gets highlighted with COVID, and I call it looking into the future, right? There's now, you have an infant or a 3-year-old or, an elementary school age child, whatever you have. But what are we all worrying about as parents is the future. Will my child be okay? What will they take from this? What will mask wearing do to my child? So there's this looking into the future, which I highly encourage you not to do, honestly, because your child is where they are right now today, and that's what matters. And then there's the different domains, right? There's work, there's home, and then there's schooling if your child's in school. And then there's the separate needs of each child. So all of these become a challenge. If you have one child and that child right now is in a really good place and your schedule is allowing you to give some continuity, great. But you know that next week might be different. So it's tuning into the needs of your child, and to remember that children are developing all the time. So just when the waters get smooth again, I'm always saying to parents who I work with, just be ready for the next dip and then the next up, because development goes very up and down. Okay. So what is this new world that we're living in today? In some ways, you have lots of pieces, hopefully, of what you had before, and then there's something new. In all of it, what really matters are those basic needs of children. So in COVID, I've been calling it safety and kindness. Children need empathy, they need understanding. That can be really hard if you've had a long day and your child's happy to see you, but mad that you were away. And yet that's really what they need. And then we have to put safety in there, which as a parent, we always do, if you think about it. We're always thinking about protecting our children, keeping them safe. But COVID really highlights that for everybody. But this is the foundation that your children learn on. If they feel safe, if they feel taken care of, they can thrive under many conditions. So what does that mean? It means really taking care of yourself, which is probably the hardest thing to do when you're both a parent and a worker during COVID. So to be thinking about what's your new structure, and I meant to ask you this, Rachel, I don't know if any of you are working from home. Is everybody?
I believe it's a mix. Script
It's a mix.
supervisors are primarily working, having to report to work, but I believe some of the other crafts, namely in the accounting maybe,
Working from home.
have the option anyway. But
Okay. So for people who are working from home, you have to give yourself a new structure, which is our old sense of time is going somewhere. So again, if you think back to the spring when everybody went home, and then eventually your work, for some of you, opened up and you went back to your workplace. But for people who then stay home, there's no sense of time in a pandemic, right? So if you're online, you're going from a Zoom meeting to a Zoom meeting or from task to task. It's very hard to define time. And people are starting to talk about this, losing that sense of time. But you need to put that in place for yourself somehow. Why? Children need it. They need that sense of here's where I am and here's the rhythm of the day. First, I have breakfast. Then mommy or daddy goes to work, which might be in the bedroom or might be out in the world. And here's who's taking care of me. So all of those pieces are important because sense of time organizes us. I also recommend that everybody lighten up on themselves. No matter who you are, what you're doing, the expectations that we have on ourselves are just unreasonable, particularly for parents of young children. You're trying to do a job in a pandemic, so there's all kinds of, on your production sets, all kinds of COVID protocols. Everything is 6 steps more. It doesn't matter what area you're in. We all have to do more. I feel like just putting a mask on to get out the door is that extra step that throws me off in the morning. It's like, do I have my coffee? Do I have my work bag? Oh, right, and the mask. So your brains are doing much more, and you have young children. So to keep that in mind, there's really no way one person can be everything, nor can you do everything perfectly. So if there was ever a time to let go of perfection, it's right now. But getting back to children, their needs are simple. And I don't mean that in a way to say that caring for children is easy, but their needs are really for safety, for security, to know that you're going to be there for them, that you're going to help them when they're having a hard time. Maybe the hard time is you cut their sandwich wrong. You can't find the pajamas they want to wear tonight. You're asking them to wear a winter coat when they want to wear, a raincoat. All of those moments can be very hard for children. And what they want to know is that you're there for them and they're going to be okay. So I know some of you work very long hours and long shifts. What do they want to know? When am I going to see you again? If it's after bedtime, then you tell your child that. I'm going to be home late tonight. Daddy's going to put you to bed. I'll see you in the morning, or I'm going to work and I'll see you at dinner. Mommy and daddy will be home with you at dinner, so that they have some concrete knowledge of when you're coming back is really what they ask for. Okay, so why are children complicated and even more complicated with work? So part of it is that their world is very different from our world. They physically reside in our world, but they emotionally and mentally don't reside in our world. And there's your challenge. So their brains can't do what ours does. What does that mean? The quick explanation of that is that their brains are very underdeveloped. The good news is they're developing, they're going forward. And, when you have a newborn, you see it, every week there's leaps and bounds in their development. 2-year-olds, it feels like a long haul, but by 3 or 4, you're like, wow, this is like a really more developed child. So they keep developing the skills to be in our world. But the part of their brain that handles emotions and being able to basically understand their emotions, manage those emotions, sequence. So first I put my socks on, then I put my shoes on. What am I going to do after breakfast? I'm going to brush my teeth. All of the part of that brain, the prefrontal cortex, is on a very slow growth pattern and is going to keep developing into the mid-20s. So I teach Barnard and Columbia college students, really wonderful people. Their brains are not quite fully developed yet. So if you go backwards and think about the age of your child, whether they're 10, 5, or 2, their brains are barely there. So what does that mean? They first have to develop this sense of self. So your youngest ones, your 2, 3, even your 4-year-olds are very much about me, in a world that wants them to be about others, right? What do we want more than anything? I think all of us, we want our children to be kind and compassionate, particularly in this world today. But they're really in, who am I? And so that can feel very selfish, but it also can make life a little complicated. And as grown-ups, we tend to think of them as mini adults sometimes. So think about if you have that very verbal 3-year-old or 6-year-old or 8-year-old, but particularly for the youngest children, if you have a very verbal child, they start talking around 2, by 3 and 4, you're having what seem like complicated conversations, and they probably are, you forget that emotionally they're still very little. But this is true for elementary age children as well, and even teenagers. Under stress, they're far younger than their verbal or mental capacities show us. So under stress, children always go back. They always regress. They have to. Now add to that the fact that children, let's say under 8, have a minimal sense of time, and toddlers have no sense of time. Your 2, 3, 4-year-olds, forget it. Right? They'll start saying things like soon or yesterday, and you'll start to feel like, oh, she does have a sense of time. But you know what yesterday means? 5 minutes ago, 3 months ago. So she'll be telling you, your child will be telling you, oh, I get that there's something before and there's something after, but it's a very rudimentary sense of time. But you might have that feeling if you've had those days where you've lost your own sense of time, even a little bit. And I hear people saying this a lot now. They'll be recalling something and they'll say, oh, was that in October? No, it was June. No, it was the beginning of the pandemic. We're all kind of in this murky water of time. That's the space that children live in. So I feel like it might give us more empathy for why they need you as the parent to guide them through every single day. The other piece of this lack of sense of time, which I find delightful, I love working in the world of toddlers, but I found it much harder when I had toddlers in my house, and even those young elementary school age children, is that they focus on the moment, which can be great when they're engaged, right? Your child's doing an art project, or they're playing with, a Brio type train, a wood train on the track, and they're creating their whole little fantasy world. They're totally into it. But what it also means, if you want to get them to dinner so you can get them to bath and bed, it can be very hard. The good news about this is they're in the here and now. They're not worrying about the future like you are. They're not thinking about what comes next. So all of your sort of, what do I need to do to help my child in this moment, in this pandemic, and then move forward as a healthy person in time, is focusing on what they need right now. In New York City, this comes into big focus around the time that parents are choosing schools for their children. So I just supported a whole group of parents who were picking preschools and or kindergarten for their children. And the question that they'll always ask is, well, which school is going to prepare my child best for the next school? You know, so what kindergarten should they be in so they get into a good high school? And I have to explain that's a ridiculous question, because so much development goes on every day, let alone every year. You have to really stick with where they are right now. And that's why children need the parent to help regulate them. You're the one who helps them with emotions. You can be really upset that daddy has to go to work again and you really wanted me to stay home, but I'll see you later, helps them know it's okay to be upset. So you're the one helping them bring those emotions down. In the pandemic, a really important thing to remember, anytime really you're a parent and or working parent, but COVID adds a whole other layer, is that children are sponges for adult emotion. They literally absorb mommy and daddy's emotions. They hear your conversations. They feel your worries. So they may not understand the content of it, but they feel it. And that in many ways is even more worrisome for them. They don't know what's going on. Often there's no need for them to know what's going on. You're making some decision that's going to be, you know, far out, but they feel your worries. So you really want to think about when you're coming home from work and you're seeing your spouse, what are you talking about? Are you sharing the latest news on COVID or the vaccines? You know, are you sharing good news or are you sharing worrisome news? What are you talking about? And then for your children as they get older, really think about what they're worrying about, listening for what they're worrying about. We often make assumptions about what our children are thinking about without asking them. So even for 3-year-olds, you can say, you know, you look a little sad today. I'm wondering what it is you're thinking about. And it can be wildly different than what you think it's going to be. Okay, so what do children need? Excuse me, in the here and now. So children across ages need, and they're going to keep needing this because the pandemic's not going to suddenly end, although the vaccine should really hopefully shift what we're doing. But what they need is an age appropriate stories of now is what I call them. So at the beginning of the pandemic, many parents said to me, we're not going to say anything to her. You know, we went to my in-laws and it's, you know, it's far from other things and we don't need to tell her. And I kept saying to parents, no, you need to explain. They're hearing the word coronavirus, pandemic. Now children are hearing the word vaccines. Your 3-year-olds, 4-year-olds, 5-year-olds, they're soaking this in. They don't know what it is, right? They're hearing words like reopening. So you almost have to be thinking about what's going on now that they might be hearing about that they have no idea. And you don't want them filling in the gaps. They're also hearing things like COVID cases. So if you have that elementary school age and up, you want to find out what they know and what they're thinking about. This is true right now. This is true going forward for whatever life brings you. I think for parents going to work, one of the pieces that often gets overlooked is that children are worried, right? So you've heard, you know, we've said to them for so long, you have to wash your hands. We can't see the grandparents right now. We're going to stay as close to home as we can. Everybody's wearing masks to stay safe. And then you say, and I'm going to go to work tomorrow morning. They're a little like, you know, hey, are you safe? So I think really asking the children 5 or 6 and up, you know, what are you thinking about? Or, you know, what do you know about Corona? But for the younger children too, to really reassure them that you're okay when you go to work and you're going to come home and you wash your hands when you come home because that's just the safe thing to do. They're thinking a lot of things that we don't know. And there's a lot of misinformation that little people get in their heads, but also even older children. So listen to them. which I get is hard to do if you're going from work to home. Um, the big mistake that we all make, we all have a firstborn, is we overtalk them. We tend to overtalk our younger children less, I think, because we're just stretched thinner and we're tired. But children don't want to be lectured ever. But we tend to overtalk. And again, if your children are verbal because of age or just their temperament and their abilities, then we really tend to overtalk them, right? So they tell us something, we keep explaining, when they really do best with a very simple answer first, and then let them ask more questions or let them tell you what they're thinking. The more you listen to children when they're young, the more they talk to you over time. And it can be as simple as you've had a long day, you come home and you greet your child, and then you say, really missed you. I'm wondering what you did today. It doesn't even have to be a question. And they tell you one thing or they don't, but they're waiting for you to be there to listen. And often what they do is they dump, right? All they want to do is complain. Your 3-year-old tells you who wouldn't play with them at school today. Your 8-year-old tells you all the things the teacher did wrong. Teenagers certainly will do that. They'll dump about everything. So they want you to listen. And what you can also listen for is, what are they worrying about? Are you hearing the same thing over and over today, over and over again? Or is it just today that they're saying it? And they really need that general reassurance, particularly in the pandemic. But really what they need is not just the reassurance of safety, which I'm sure you've all been giving them through the pandemic. At times we were unsure. Hopefully you're feeling a little more certain now. But also a perspective. Children come from the here and now. They have no perspective. So if today you're worried about something, they don't know that that's your worry for today. So saying to them, things are getting better. And I got my vaccine. And yeah, it hurt a little bit on my arm, but you know what? I'm safer now. And then they say, am I going to get one? Well, you can let them know that children don't really get all that sick right now, but one day, hopefully they will. I think letting children know something about that more and more people are getting the vaccine, and that's going to help us, regardless of what the newspaper headlines are telling us about variants, that is really something very hopeful, and children hold on to that. If it has to do with other headlines, protests, for example, I just put that example there. Children had lots of questions last summer about protests. There were lots of children I saw at the protests. They really need to know that people are protesting because they want things to change. They want them to be better. So you can demystify in all kinds of ways. Put this up. But also telling children their role in this. So, we're sort of beyond hand washing being new, but it was new for a long time. I think that's a way to empower children. We all wash our hands. Everybody does it. That keeps our hands clean and safe. You're doing it. Our cousins in France are doing it. It gives them the sense of being part of it. And then I'm just going to jump to the silver linings. Now that we're a year into this, I hope that you have found some silver linings, which I was skeptical of at the beginning. I knew that they would emerge, but I was skeptical, like, what's going to really come out of this that could possibly be any good? I hear regularly from parents who are juggling work and children and maybe school that there are these silver linings. Whether you've come up with new rituals, whether you've been home more, even though you're trying to work from home and take care of children, whether you're cooking more with your children, whatever it is, reflect on those silver linings for yourself, but also share them with your children, because that's special for them too. If you're worrying as a parent about the schooling piece, I will say we know this now, homeschooling, or I should call it online schooling, is not regular school. There's no question about that, particularly for young children or elementary age. I even see it with the high schoolers. But children are learning every day. So they might be doing something online. That's fine. But they're learning all the time. Spring is a time of unbelievable learning. Why? There's changes going on in nature all the time, whether it's out your front window or at the park. There's new growth. Older children and, elementary age can do plant studies. You could chart the growing in your yard. There's all kinds of things that children are learning every day without formal instruction. And that's the piece I think that we often forget. Your young children are playing. They're playing with blocks. They're drawing or scribbling with crayons. All of that is learning for them. They don't need formal sit down with a teacher learning, particularly at these younger ages. And what's the other piece that supports children? This is it. This is the big lesson. You could take nothing else from today. They need routines just like we need routines. So what's the key to success during really uncertain times, but also times of great change, right? We're going through incredible change. It's going to keep coming. Routines are what organize us. It's what helps you get through the morning. It's what helps you get through the workday. It's what calms children. So the more that your child can predict something, the calmer they feel, right? They like regularity. They like consistency. I know what to expect. Oh, I hear the bathtub. That means bath. Daddy gives me a bath every night. Mommy puts my pajamas on, and then I go to sleep. They might protest it, but they know what they know. And so anytime you have change, the more you can get routines into place, and the quicker, the better. And that also helps them become independent over time, right? 2-year-olds are just putting their foot on that path to independence. It's a really slow path that gets rolled out, but it does support their independence. It's really what provides safety and security for them. So when there's disruption to routines, which can be as simple as you go away for a weekend, if you have that luxury yet in the pandemic, you go away for a weekend, it might be great. Maybe you go to a friend's house or wherever you go, but it's disruption. And you may have experienced this, you come back and your 3 and 5-year-old are kind of bonkers. It's because the routines were disrupted, even if you have a great time together. Then you come back, you reestablish routines. It answers their question of what's going on. The easiest way to think about it is anything you do every day is a place to start for routines, right? So it's the structure of the day. That's mealtime, that's sleep, bath, getting dressed, so sort of those touch points of the day that happen every day, regardless of anything else. But you don't need to be rigid on it, right? It's a general structure. You may have had this experience of you try to skip one part of the bedtime routine because you've had a long day, your child's tired, and you think, well, just skip that little piece. And your child looks at you and says, no, we didn't do that song that we always do, or you can't skip that page of the book. They know their routine, and that's what brings them calm and reassurance. So you don't need to be rigid about it. If you remember back to about a year ago when the pandemic started, and we were all talking about how we can get routines for ourselves, and I was obviously meeting with a lot of parents about the routines, people started these crazy schedules. I saw them online, and at first I thought, what a great idea, until I realized over time they weren't, which was they were literally scheduling like every half hour of their 4 or 6-year-old's day. It's impossible. But having a general routine will help. Maybe after breakfast, if you're all home working and doing school, your child helps you water plants on Tuesdays. That becomes their routine. So don't make yourself crazy with it. But you can also put really great new routines in. And again, if you're going to work, part of the routine is leaving. So what's your leaving routine with your child? What's your coming home routine with your child? Does your child like to take your coat and hang it up on a hook because that's a way to greet you? Does your child immediately have to tell you something from their day or show you what they just built? But you also might have put new routines in this year that are fun. For some people, that's game night. For many families, that's become FaceTime with grandparents who maybe you saw regularly, and hopefully with vaccine you're seeing again or will soon. But that might be FaceTime that you never used before with a grandparent, or your child was too young a year ago, but now you are. Those are wonderful new routines. They can also bridge work and home. If you are one of those people who has to be out for long hours, in your work, you can put in, if you haven't already, a FaceTime, or for some children, it's better just a voice phone call, around dinner time or after their nap with some regularity, but your schedule may not allow for that, but it can be a touch point. And if your child doesn't want to speak to you, because often they're busy, they're in another moment, then whoever has the phone, your caregiver, your partner, can say to them, mommy called to say hello and she loves you. Just so your child knows that they're there. So any of those new routines can be helpful. And then before I leave some time for questions, I just want to talk about reasonable expectations for self, which is kind of where I started. As a parent and as a worker, you're also a spouse or partner, or you're on your own, which is another challenge. You're a caregiver. You may be a caregiver to not only children, but also to parents. Many people are in that. It's a lot of tasks. And so you want to really think about what is reasonable. What's reasonable at work, what's reasonable at home. There are some pieces that you have to do at work. They're not negotiable, they're not going away, but there are other pieces that you might say to yourself, I'm just going to have to do this a little less, be on top of this piece a little less. I found that I've become a much better delegator this year. Why? I was forced to, right? There were so many more tasks to take on, to reopen a program, to run a program, to teach online to college students. I had to learn to delegate at the next level. So think about in your workplace or in your life where you can bring down your expectations and be a little less hard on yourself. For those of you feeling guilt, dump it is all I can say. As a psychologist, there's no benefit to guilt. I used to think, well, it's a motivator. Like when I was first a parent and then had my second child, I realized, there's really no benefit to this. And it holds you back and it's exhausting. So think about, what it is you're feeling guilty about. Of course, you can't do everything for your child if you're at work, and you can't do everything that maybe you used to do at work if you also have children. So really think about taking care of your own needs, even in small moments. If the pandemic has taught me and others something, I think it's that we have to find small moments. What does that look like? Maybe it means getting up 15 minutes earlier. If you're lucky enough to have a child or a baby who's got a regular wake up time, get up 15 minutes earlier, sip your tea or your coffee by yourself. Take a longer shower, steal those little moments. If you're going to work and you're coming home, don't rush in the door. You might rush home because it's a long day and you want to kiss your child before they go to sleep, but you might, park your car or get off the subway a few blocks earlier than you would have so that you can walk and exhale. So really thinking about when you can take care of yourself. Mood management has become really important with COVID. The demands of work and the demands of home are huge. And the more you think about the future, the more anxious people tend to become. So sticking with the moment, meaning what do I need to do today? What do I have to have in place for my children? What do I need to be taking to work and thinking about? And then when you get to tomorrow, you get to tomorrow. Now, some people feel better planning a whole week. Do what you need to do, but the less far out, when there's lots of change, the better off you are. Now, often with work, there's lots of things you have to plan out. But the more you can manage, like how much do I really need to plan out? Do I need to be worrying about or thinking about that thing that's due in 3 weeks, or can I focus on what's due at the end of today? So managing that will help you manage your mood. Anxiety and worry are totally normal during crisis. So I really want to put that up front. Right now, I think for most of us, we're not in crisis mode, but we're still in a pandemic. So if you didn't have anxiety, you didn't have some worry, you wouldn't be as motivated as you are. Stress actually helps build our muscles and our children's muscles around handling stress. So we didn't need all the stress that we've had this year for sure. But I know that parents worry. What about my children? I don't ever want them to be unhappy. I don't want them to be stressed. They have to be stressed somewhat to handle stress. That's different than traumatic experiences. But when you go to work in the morning, think for yourself, are you that parent whose child is really upset when you go to work? They might be, or maybe they sometimes are, or maybe they used to be. The fact that once you leave and who's ever taking care of them says to you, you know, within 5 minutes, he's okay, says they've learned to handle the goodbye, which they don't like, that's normal everyday stress. So that up and down of stress is actually not only okay for children, it's a normal reaction. Treat yourself in small ways. That's dark chocolate on my part. And I think it's really important. We're in a place where we can start to review the year, right? Maybe we didn't really want to. I don't think anybody expected to get to a year and to be doing things for a second time. I'm planning a Passover Seder for a second year that's going to include people online. I'm like, that's not fun. My brother pointed out to me that he's celebrating his birthday for a second time. He was, I think, proud of this. He's the youngest in my family, you know, of origin. He's like, and I have the second birthday in a pandemic in our family, which is actually this week. So, you know, there's lots that you can review, but you can also review all kinds of acts of kindness, large and small. And I think that's an important reminder to yourself as a parent, as an adult, but also to your children, right? You know, our neighbor brought over some cookies, or we did this for our friend. You might see it on the street, somebody does something for someone. Really seeing the positive out there is very, very important to children. And just being kind and gentle on yourself. All too often, when you're going between work and home, the easiest thing to lose is taking care of yourself. And I don't mean this to be a burden to anyone. Like, you're not going to find hours in the day. You're going to find small moments. So in those small moments, try not to lose sight of what you need. And then, of course, partners or friends, which have been very hard to connect to, even if that partner's living in your home, because there's only so many hours in a day. But reaching out to people matters. Okay, and then I'm going to end this with this. Children are developing every day. Whether you go to work, whether you work at home, they're developing. And that's the good news. I think it's actually the best news. They develop in spite of us, in spite of whatever's going on in the world. And I've seen it in full picture this year by running a program for 2-year-olds. So we have 40 children. They don't all come at once, but we had 40 children enrolled. And as the year went on, I thought, I don't know what this year's going to look like. I've done this for 25 years. This year's different, and there have been differences. But as the year went on, the children have developed in the leaps and bounds that they do in ways that they always do. And that has been the most reassuring piece for me to see. Yes, there's been more regression. Yes, there's been more aggression. But they're moving forward exactly as I would have predicted if we didn't have COVID. And that tells you that children will develop no matter what. So what's your job as a parent? Enjoy them, right? Find the humor. If you have one moment of shared joy every day with your child, I say that's a good day. If you have many moments of shared joy, great. But what they need is to connect to you and get that feeling of mommy loves me, daddy loves me, we got it. And to know, given that most of you have young children, it goes quickly. It doesn't feel like it goes quickly, but it does. So I'm going to end there. If you're social media people, those are my handles and whatever, and that's my book. And I would love to take questions that are, you know, in line with what you're thinking about right now or specifics. So I'm going to stop that. All right. And now we're back. So I would be happy to take questions either from the chat, or if you just want to unmute, please do. Yes, and the vaccine is coming for children. They are testing right now, which is great hope. I have a 16-year-old at home, and he's going to be eligible soon. So, and then the under 16s. Justin, please. Go ahead.
Yeah. Hi, can you hear me?
Mm-hmm.
Can you hear me? Okay.
Okay.
So I've been off work for the past year, semi-intentionally.
Huh?
And our son, who is 2 years old, goes to daycare. And our routine has been every night he comes home, and I have been focused on him, pretty solid, largely when he comes home. And
Mhm.
now I've started in a new job this week, and I am still here, but in the evening I need to focus on the job. And sometimes I go in other rooms, and I'm on the phone, and I'm on my computer, and he's handling it, I guess, a little bit better than I would expect, but there's still like if I put him to bed at night, sometimes he'll fairly quickly point to his crib and say bed, and then once he's in the crib, he points to the door and says go.
Yeah.
And like, so he's a character. He's very strong.
He's saying go because he wants to go, or he wants you to go?
He wants me to go.
Oh.
Yeah, and so he's expressing a little bit of resentment, a little bit of anger and hostility at losing time, and
Yeah.
I feel profoundly. I mean, I know what you said about guilt.
Yeah, I knew what you were gonna say.
Yeah, but how
Yeah.
how do we make this adjustment okay? How do we reassure him
Yeah.
that, and it gets me in my heart that he feels, and he doesn't necessarily love going to bed anyway. We try generally to keep the routine pretty tight, and we these phones will set an alarm, and then when the alarm hits 7:45 or 7:30 or 8 o'clock, and we'll point to it, and when we set it, and we like 10 minutes, 15
So let me ask you
minutes.
this: when did your
And then when it
child
goes
turn?
off,
When did he turn 2?
early February 4th.
Oh, so he's a baby. He just turned 2.
Yeah, he's
Yeah.
25 months now.
Okay. Okay.
And
So you're
I
asking
just,
a good question, and I'm going to answer yours and broaden it a little bit for anybody else who might be transitioning from I've been home, or I've been the primary caregiver and now I'm doing more work. You have a partner, it's just you?
I have a partner, yeah.
Okay, so there's 2 of you. Okay.
Yeah.
So anytime there's a change, it's a shakeup for your child. But when you have a 2-year-old, they're developing rapidly. So 2 is often the time that somebody has a new baby, or I always say New York City has a new baby and or moves. Like for some reason around the age of 2, like you feel like your apartment's too small, whatever it is, it tends to be a time of change. But 2-year-olds are also rapidly changing. They want to be separate. They want to be out in the world a little more, but they don't want you to leave them. So I actually put my thumb up that he's saying to you go, because lucky you. If there's anybody on this call whose child is screaming for them to stay, they would love their child to say go. It gives him control, right? You're putting me to sleep. I'm in control of your leaving. And if you think about what children of all ages experience most days if they're at home, is parents leave them. Like no matter how kind and loving you are, you say goodbye, you leave them. So that's control to say you go. Is 1. 2 is say to your child or anyone else, to your children, it's not your fault that daddy has to go work right now. Because what young children do is they absorb change as I must have done something wrong. That's that self-centered, the beauty of the self-centeredness is anything that they do that's good, they're like, look how great I am. And anything that impacts them negatively or they don't understand, they worry, uh-oh, why is this happening? So it's a very simple explanation because he's young. And if you were a little older, you could say a little more, but you say, daddy has to go to work. You're going to be with mommy or whoever he's going to be with. And it's not your fault. And I'll see you in the morning or I'll see you at dinner. They always need to know the return. he can be upset, he can cry. That's what I was talking about before, those stressors that are normal that help them actually build some resilience over time. You could also, if it's a bedtime thing, you could also give him something of yours to sleep with. Children love to have like a t-shirt from a parent, a family photo, you know, it's so great that you could just print them out, they can tear them up, but something of you to sleep with can help children through these moments. But if you really are shifting, what I think one of the hardest pieces of the work at home during the pandemic is this. Prior to the pandemic, I would say to parents, once your children are about 18, 19, 20 months, you can't really work at home anymore. You get kind of this free pass. And then you can't because they don't get it, right? Wait, you're home and you're not here for me. And the pandemic doesn't allow, I mean, I wouldn't say that to a parent right now, because where are you going to go? If you have to work at home, you have to work at home. So what children need is some kind of demarcation to say, daddy has to go to work, or if it's a mommy has to go to work in my bedroom, let them know who's going to take care of them. And you close the door. They feel very rejected. There's no way around it, which is why I used to say to parents, oh, no, you can't work at home once you have a 2-year-old and up. But you can also do things like if you have a workspace, if it's in your bedroom, and even if it's at your nightstand, you know, if you don't have a desk or something, put a picture of your child. And if you have older children, put like a drawing or something they've done, put that right by whatever your workstation is. And then you say to your children, when I go to work in my bedroom, I'm with you and I have your beautiful picture that you made and I have your photo. So basically your child thinks all the time, daddy or mommy is only thinking of me, because that's their world. They don't actually think there's a moment in the day that you're not thinking about them. So
That's
a little
true.
explanation will help. What's that?
I said that's probably true.
So only for your firstborn.
There's not
Only
a
for your-
moment of the day that. Yeah.
So it is a transition, but the other thing for everyone listening to think about is it's not your job to make your children happy. So we as parents, that's probably the hardest piece of being a parent, is to recognize children know how to be happy. They know when to be happy. You know, give them what they want, they're happy. Go on an outing with them and it's just the two of you, they're happy. But it's our job to help them through the hard emotions. That's your lifelong job. How do I help you understand that it's okay to be angry? It's okay to be mad at me. It's okay to be frustrated. And as we help them manage those tough emotions, that's what really gives them the strength to then keep moving forward at each age and in life. Happiness comes when they can handle those emotions. But we as parents almost always think, particularly with our firstborns, that it's our job to keep them happy, and it's actually not. It's actually not. If you have more than one child, you learn that pretty quickly because you don't have the energy to make the second or the third or the fifth happy. But if you can really think about that, we all have a firstborn, right? You all have a firstborn or an only. Really think about, am I allowing my child to have their anger, to get frustrated? And are you there to say like, oh, that is frustrating, rather than putting the puzzle piece in for them all the time? That's what will give them strength and motivation, by the way. If they can handle those tough feelings in time with your support, they're more motivated. Any other questions on any age? Yeah, Cynthia, hi.
Hi, I have a question about preteens going through starting puberty in a box, basically. Is there any good resource, like you recommended your book for toddlers,
Yeah.
just to help us with, you know, little battles that can come up with becoming more independent, cut off from friends, more screen time, and how we're reacting.
Yeah.
You know, is that something she heard on a show, or is that coming from, you know, her own frustration and different parenting styles?
Yeah.
One more traditional, one, you know, what have psychologists learned in the last decades that might help us react in a better way?
Yeah, in a better way. Yeah, it's a great question. So, it's interesting because my work with toddlers always dovetails with my work with the preteens, because as much as toddlers are on their first step to independence, as you just noted, preteens and then teenagers are on their next kind of big leap into independence. And the other piece is that toddlers are in the first stage of like identifying myself, right? That's the me, who am I? What do I like? And teenagers are about to go through that again, right? Who am I? I'm not just gonna do that because my mother says, I'm gonna choose my own opinions, et cetera. So there are a lot of parallels. The preteen ages are complicated because that's when you get the hormone ramp up for puberty. I will say I was very naive with my first child. I thought, oh, when they become a teenager is when you're going to get these challenges. What I didn't grasp at the time was, no, if they're going to hit puberty, then there's going to be a big ramp up to puberty. And I don't know why it's not written about more. But I think many of us found that beginning of independence, that beginning of hormones that you're not really seeing yet, the changes is what's hard for a child, right? It's a big change for them. So a couple of things I would say, I mean, you threw out many things, but I would say a couple of things. I'm not worrying so much about screen time because I don't think any of you have the luxury to worry about it. Let me give you the context that prior to this, I was a big devotee of, I don't like screens. I don't like them for any age. So how do we prepare children to be in a screen world when we know it's not ideal for them? In a pandemic, I have definitely switched to say, you have to survive. And children are on their screens now for school, for social, for entertainment. They have no options at the moment. That doesn't mean you can't have rules. Meal times, there should be no screens. I think you can have limits on outdoor. If you have young children, there's no need for screens outside. But the preteens, or if they've got a smartphone and they're communicating with friends, you can put some limits on it. I think it's really important to give them some limits, even in the house. But why am I not worried about it? Because I think as soon as life opens up for children, they want to be with their friends. Your daughter wants to be with her friends. I see the children bouncing back when they, get to gather in the park or they go to school in some normal way. I see this for younger children, middle and older. So what do you do though about, what you're really describing are the moody stuff that comes with the preteen. She wants to separate. Believe me, she needs you more than she ever has. She's like a toddler again in her need for you, and a toddler again in her desire to be away, and yet she can't be away because it's a pandemic. I would think about any way you can give her some independence. So those can be little or big ways. If she likes to cook, does she want to pick a recipe? Does she want to learn how to cook or help in some way? You can teach, if she's never cooked, you can teach children how to make scrambled eggs. Something simple, start there. Give her ways to be independent. If you're in the city and there's places she can, is there a corner store that she goes? For my kids, the big adventure was going to buy bread in the neighborhood, right? If you're in an apartment building, if you have younger children, for those of you younger, if they're old enough that they can go down and pick up the mail, all of those things are independence and agency. So she's looking for agency in a big way. I want to do something myself that I normally would be doing, because normally is she going to school or she's online?
Both. She's
Both.
Hybrid. Yeah.
So on the days that she goes to school, if she gets to walk home or walk home from a bus, like all of those are moments of independence. If there's ways to stretch that out, can she hang out with a friend outside, after school for a certain amount of time? Anything that you feel is safe enough, like that's a family decision, will help her feel like she's got some decision making. She's looking for decision making. For you and your partner, it's really about exhaling. That's all I can say. You need a lot of humor. You really have to exhale, and you have to depersonalize everything. It's not about you, it's about her. You know, if your children mouth off to you, particularly at her age, you can say something like, I used to say to my children, and I have to say, I mean, I have really good kids. So the moments that they would really mouth off, I was always so taken aback. Like, I knew this was coming, but whoa. And I would just kind of go, why don't you try that again? Like, you know, at that moment that I was going to just
Mhm.
basically respond in an adolescent way, you've got to pull yourself back. Say like, okay, I'm the adult here. If you come up with some ways to actually manage your own self, they respond better. And if
Mhm.
it really is over the top, you can say, I'm not responding to that. You can be upset. I'm actually not going to respond to that. You want to try it again? It brings her down in the same way that we bring toddlers down, right? Obviously, you sort of grab them where they are and exhale with them. It doesn't mean that she's going to say, oh, yeah, sure, mom, everything's fine. She might storm away, but that's better than engaging in a battle. And then I would think about everywhere she can have some decision making. You know, if there's days that maybe she could go to school, like my son's high school just said, Fridays, they might open up some clubs that can come in person. I thought, oh, here's a point that he can make a decision. You know, it's like, you know, do you think you'd want to do that? And he said, oh, it depends what club it is. You know, we just had like a discussion. Of course, all I wanted to do was say run to school on Fridays. So any way you can give them a little bit of decision-making power will help.
Mhm.
That's
Okay.
again true for younger children as well, different decisions, but for a preteen for sure. And then commiserate with her. Yeah, it's really rotten that you still can't go anywhere with your friends, but can she go outside with them? Is there some pod or one or two that she can meet with? Like, think about where you can give her a little bit of that social contact.
Yeah,
They need it.
we've had that. It becomes difficult when parents have other problems. So.
Yeah, no, it's
Yeah.
it's very hard.
Mhm.
And lighten up on the screens, everybody listening.
Yeah.
Use them when you need to use them. If your children are younger, know, I always say with the younger children, know why you're using it. Am I using it because I need a break? That's fine. Am I using it because I have a work call? That's fine. But just know for yourself why you're using it, because it will help you get rid of them as we open up more
Mhm.
as well.
Thanks.
All right. I think that's time, Rachel.
Yeah, I think so. I don't have any hands raised and I don't see anything in the chat. So we may have hit all
I hope
questions,
so.
comments. Yeah.
And my information is on there. If anybody wants to contact me, I'm happy to be in touch as well.
Awesome.
All right. Thank you for having
Thank
me.
you, Tovah. Thank you for coming in.
Bye.
Bye, guys. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
And yeah. All right.
Rachel, I just wanted to say a great thank you